of course. And I'll be talking today only about the eastern part of Australia, and mostly in the coastal area. So I'll be going from up on the Cape York Peninsula at a site called Laura, which is sort of northwest of Cairns, and then down to 2 sites in Queensland, and then several sites in the general area of Sydney, and some things in Canberra. And then there's a site in Victoria I'll talk about, which is a state park, Black Range State Park, and it's just west of the Grampians National Park. And then I'll have one in Hobart, in Tasmania, also on the west coast of Tasmania. Okay, so Jeff, could we have the next one, please? Well, I'll leave that on the screen, and I'll say a few words about how I came to be doing this here today. I came to Australia in 1972 with my wife and 2 children, David and Anita, in order to teach Hindi at the ANU. And in the department that I was teaching in, there was a woman, Dr. Louise Herkus. She taught Sanskrit. I taught Hindi and she taught Sanskrit, but we were in the same department. And Louise was also a researcher in Aboriginal languages. So in 1974, Louise asked me and my wife and our 2 children to accompany her on an expedition to the Northern Territory, to the Simpson Desert, where she was recording sacred sites of the Wonkunguru people. Wonkunguru are a group that lived down in that sort of southeast corner of the Northern Territory, and also into South Australia to the south. Wonkunguru people to record their sacred sites and also the traditions associated with them. So we on the way, we went through Port Augusta, and there we picked up or joined us a very interesting, wonderful person who was an elder of the Wonkunguru people. He was also an authority of traditional knowledge of that group. He was very highly respected. His name was Mick McLean Irinyali, and he went with us on the expedition. And it was then, while I was talking with him, of course there was plenty of time to talk around camp, and we would talk a lot about, of course, Aboriginal things. And I became very interested in that. And so I eventually, my interest turned to Aboriginal rock paintings and rock engravings. And that's why I'm here today. Now, I should say, first of all, that there's a great deal around Canberra itself of Aboriginal life from before European contact. And I'd just like to say a few things about those objects or those Aboriginal features. For one thing, there are in Namaji National Park 6 rock painting sites. Of the 6 rock painting sites, one was very, very popular at Yankee Hat Mountain on the old Baboyan Road. Unfortunately, in the 2019 bushfires, they have things like there was a wooden platform around the rock art so you could walk and see it. And that was removed. I think it was removed. I hope it was removed because, of course, it would be very dangerous if it had caught fire for the paintings. But anyway, it has not yet been reopened to the public, but it's only temporarily closed. It will be reopened. It's just that it'll take a while to get that platform rebuilt and to fix it up so that it can be, again, open to the public. But I thought I should give you if anyone here hasn't been there, an idea of the rock art at Yankee Hat Mountain. It's on a big boulder and it's really a rock shelter, and it has paintings in white pipe clay and red ochre. There are kangaroos, there are dingoes. There's a rather uncertain figure. It looks like a turtle to me, but I think people say it's not. Then there are human figures like this one in red ochre. Very, very interesting, and they're very typical of the rock art in the ACT. So I'm looking forward to the time when we can go there and sort of look at it and talk about it. In addition to that, I should say that the Yankee Hat rock art has actually entered the conscious life of Canberra. Because when you go to Garima Place to City Walk, you find there are two pillars set up, and on one of them, they've actually put the Yankee Hat rock art. So you can see there's that same kangaroo, the same human figure, the dingo, and the one that I think looks like a turtle. So those paintings from Yankee Hat have come to be a part of Canberra, which I think is really wonderful. Now, there are other sites, other Aboriginal sites that date from before European contact in Canberra as well. Aboriginal people took the bark of trees, took chunks or big chunks sometimes of bark. It doesn't kill the tree, of bark off, and they used that to make utensils, canoes, shelters, things like that. And here at Crace, this is in the suburb of Crace. In Crace, you can see one of these scarred trees. You can see it's really quite big. It starts up here, and it goes all the way down there and up again. So is it a shelter or even a canoe? I don't know, of course, but it's pretty spectacular. And anyone can go there. It's a little park, and you can see, if you haven't seen one before, a scarred tree. And then in the suburb of Canberra, there is another scarred tree. You can see there, it's also quite big, goes like that, around like that. And that's a kind of sad story to that one. It's just on an ordinary residential street. Again, anyone can go there. And to find the location, you can look, if you look on the internet, scarred trees in Canberra, you'll get the street address for this. Anyway, someone, before I took this photo, just before, someone has taken and removed some bark there. So that's an act of vandalism, of course. And this white paper that you see there is a police notice saying that the police are investigating that illegal act. That was, I think, in 2018, I think that was. I visited that tree recently, and of course, nothing can be done about that act of vandalism. Yeah. Okay, well, another reason why Aboriginal people scarred trees was to take the bark off and then incise the trees with designs. Now, they did that in order to mark graves. It's said to be old European settlers of the Canberra area say there were scarred trees like that marking graves, but there aren't any anymore as far as I know. I certainly never seen one or heard of one. This one is located 4 kilometers south of Molong in New South Wales, and it's called the Uriani Aboriginal Grave Historic Heritage Site. The story behind it is that when Sir Thomas Mitchell did an expedition in the 1840s to inland Australia, he had with him, in addition to many other people, of course, an Aboriginal man who was a Wiradjuri man named Uriani. And 4 years after that expedition, Uriani died, and his grave was marked by 4 of these scarred trees around it. So the grave is here, and then there's a scarred tree, scarred tree, scarred tree, and scarred tree, each one with these designs. And of course, no one has recorded what the scars, what the carving actually can be interpreted as, but it's certainly there to mark his grave. Next one. Now, Mitchell was so fond of Uri that he came there a bit later and had a European-style headstone put onto the grave, and there's a more recent one has been put up there because this one's becoming unreadable. So that's the only place in Australia that you have an Aboriginal grave memorial together with a European grave memorial. So that's quite an interesting place. Well, there's another place in Canberra that, well, it's not actually in Canberra, but it's just slightly over the border in New South Wales. It's on the road to Yass. There is a church, the Wattle Park, I think it's called, Wattle Park Uniting Church. And in 1854, the church built a vestry. They put up a vestry. The church is quite old, but they put the vestry. Yes, sorry, it is Wattle Park Uniting Church, yes. They put a vestry up, and they asked the parishioners if each parishioner could donate a stone from their property, because of course it's a rural area. And one person donated an Aboriginal axe. And so they built the Aboriginal axe into the wall of the vestry. And if you go there, you can see that. It's, as I say, just beyond Hall, over the border. And you see the Wattle Park Church on the right. And you go in and go to the vestry, and you'll see this Aboriginal axe in the wall. So I think that's probably a unique reminder of our Aboriginal history in Canberra. Now, there's another Aboriginal monument in the ACT. On Mount Namaji, in Namaji National Park, there is an initiation ground, a Bora ground, and it is marked with stones. Now, it's very difficult to get there. It's not really marked. There's no marker, and it would take you. It takes 2 days anyway to get there from, say, Yankee Hat if you go from that side. So it's very hard to get to. A Canberra archaeologist, Josephine Flood, in a very interesting little book she wrote called Moth Hunters of the Australian Capital Territory, she has illustrated that Bora ground, so you can see a picture of it. And then in Morton National Park, off the Narragaw Road between Braidwood and Nowra, there is another Bora ground, and that's on a hill or mountain called Quilty's Mountain. So the Quilty's Mountain Bora ground is very impressive, and it's been known scientifically since 1932, when an article in Oceania was written about it by someone named C.C. Towell. So, it's a walk. You've got to, you have to start very early in the morning to get there and go back again to the parking area before dark on a summer day. You've got lots of light, but it's very, very much worthwhile seeing. Okay. Now, in most of Eastern Australia, because of the trauma of the clash of Aboriginal and European cultures in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, most of the Aboriginal knowledge was not handed down from generation to generation. There was a break in it because, for one thing, there was a population collapse in the Aboriginal population, and those people were dispersed to missions and so on, away from their home areas. So, generally speaking, it's not known what most of the rock art or rock paintings in the eastern part of Australia mean, or what they meant to their creators. Nevertheless, of course, they're very, very important to modern Aboriginal people. And people do keep a sense of their importance, even if they don't know the exact meaning. Well, there's one place in Eastern Australia where the tradition has been handed down, and that's at near the town of Laura in the Cape York Peninsula, if you see on your map there. And there are wonderful Aboriginal paintings. They're rock paintings. Some of them are available on a little walking track you can do with the self-guiding signage that's been put up by the Angara Aboriginal Land Corporation. So they manage the site. And other and probably more impressive art is only available on a special tour you can take with a member of the Angara, of the Angara Aboriginal Corporation.
Where is that again?
Well, it's at Laura. Laura is a little town. If you go from Mariba and you're going toward the tip of the towards Cohen on the road that goes up to Weipa on the Cape York Peninsula, there's a little town called Laura, and Laura, maybe a kilometer or so from Laura, there are the self-guiding walk. And then if you get a member of the corporation, and there are people there, there's a little kind of a museum there run by the Angara people, and they will arrange for someone to take you on a more extensive walk. And I did that along with Barbara Spode, who's here today with us. And we did go and we looked at those rock art, which is most impressive. Yep. And I just want to say a few words about each of these paintings so that you can see what it was like if you know really what the meaning is. Now, this one is a painting of a spirit in white there. And you can see this is a spirit that's unpredictable. In other words, it's a spirit that can be hostile, or it might not be hostile, but it's a dangerous spirit, you might say. And they paint it with the legs up like that, bent upward like that, and with this strange genital thing there. So you can see this unpredictable spirit, and beside it is a woman painted in yellow. So that's a very interesting sort of sight. Yes. Another one is of another one of those strange spirits, those hostile spirits. There's another woman there, and there is a dingo probably, and there's a wallaby. Now, of course, whether those are actually part of a narrative isn't known. So, you don't know, was this dingo painted? You can see the tail is over that unpredictable spirit. So the spirit would be painted first, then the dingo later. Was it put together to make a story? You don't know. That can't be told. The guy didn't know either. So we don't know, but it's a very, very interesting construction. Yeah. Excellent. And this one is quite fascinating. This is a horse. So it's called the Giant Horse Cave. And that would be painted then after the 1860s for sure, because the 1860s were the first European contact in that area. And of course, there were no horses in Australia. So this horse was painted by Aboriginal people there because, of course, they found that a very amazing creature, as you can imagine. But there's another side to this, because under the horse's hoofs, is a European man. And he has been bucked off and he's being trampled. So is that telling us, again, something that actually happened? Or is it possibly, as the guide said, a kind of sorcery? You paint that and you hope that will happen to somebody you don't like. And the next one is an example, this is an example of another kind of spirit. This is a Quincan spirit, This is often referred to as Quincan art as a whole, Quinkan. And this is a Quincan spirit, and they can be male or they can be female, and they are benign to humans. So they're a spirit that is good to humans. And you can see this Quincan spirit, he's got one hand under that horse's head. Now, that's probably because the horse was painted after the Quincan was painted, and not that the horse was actually somehow associated with it. And then there's a stingray here as well. So another example of this sort of art. There's also a small male Quincan. They're both male Quincans. Next one. Yeah. Now, this is a female Quincan. You can see she's got breasts. That's a female Quincan, and painted in red ochre. And she is there with her hands up like that. And that's a warning figure to warn people away from a women's sight. So, you know, they had sites that were, that women could use and sites that men could use, but neither sex was allowed to go to the other sex's site. So this Quincan figure tells any men that they shouldn't go any further there. Okay. Now, I mentioned before that horse that was trampling the European might have been sorcery. Well, this one, according to our guide, definitely was sorcery. This is a red ochre figure of a European, and he's lying on his side. So the tradition was that if a figure is upright, it's alive, a living being, can be spirit or human. If it's upside down, it's dead. And if it's on its side, it's sick. So the idea was that this European, whoever it was, if you paint him in a sick posture, he'll get sick. So it's a sorcery painting to accomplish that. You can easily imagine the kind of things that some of the European settlers might have done that would, bring that kind of response. Okay. Now, at the beginning, if you talk about the meaning of Aboriginal rock art, I really didn't spend much time pondering about it when I first started out, because, as I say, in most cases, you just can't know what the art meant to those who created it because the knowledge is lost. And I just sort of appreciated it, enjoyed it for what it was. And I think that's perhaps one of the best ways to approach it. It's, a very interesting kind of art, and you don't have to know what it originally meant in order to appreciate it. That was even true of some of the really enigmatic art that you find. So this is from the west coast of Tasmania, a place called Sundown Bay. And I don't know if you can see it very well. And I can assure you, you can't see it very well, even if you're there. But it is there. It has been written about. It is scientifically correct. They are really Aboriginal engravings, though it may look to you like it's just natural, but they are, and they've been written up. It's a circle, and there also are lines. So it's very enigmatic, what those circles might have meant. And it was interesting when I was there photographing these, there were people, riding their beach buggies and their trail bikes and things, zooming around on the beach there, right by these things. And of course, nobody knew about it. And in some ways, maybe it's just as well they didn't. Next one. Okay, well, this idea of circles, of painting circles or drawing or engraving circles. This particular one is from that state park I mentioned, Black Ridge State Park, just west of the Grampians National Park. And by the way, Grampians National Park has a lot of very fine Aboriginal rock paintings too. But this one shows, again, circles and straight lines. That's another common motif that you find. And it's not just in Aboriginal art, but all over the world, including northern England, you find ancient rock engravings and rock paintings that have that same circular spiral kind of motif. Okay. And it fascinates me that this is from near the lake's entrance. It, as you see, it's a company, Triple C, Property Development Investments, and quite recently they've had their logo is two C's. But you know, it seems to me that that's also a kind of a vestigial memory of that idea of circles and spirals. I mean, you might be dubious about that, but anyway, it seems that way to me, that this idea, this fascination with circles and spirals continues today as well. Well, another reason why I liked to go and look at Aboriginal rock art and photograph it and appreciate it. Another reason I like to do that was because these rock art sites are often located in extremely beautiful areas. So this one is the Gulgan rock art site in Blackdown Tableland National Park in Queensland, if you find that on your map. It's number, I can tell you the number of it. It's number 19 and 20. And it has a wonderfully attractive area. It's a tableland, what I'd call a mesa, which is quite high, and you drive up it, and on top there's this beautiful terrain, and this is the pathway to that rock art site I mentioned. So, you know, just the beauty of where these bits of art are is attractive. Yeah, and at that rock art site, there is stencils. So there are several kinds of Aboriginal rock art. There could be rock paintings where, you know, there were paintings done on the rock. There could be rock engravings where you pick out a rock outline. I'll go into that in a minute. And there also were stencils where you put maybe a hand up there and you fill in your mouth a mixture of usually animal fat and ochre and water, and you spray that on so that it outlines the hand. That's actually, of course, a left hand, and it leaves that stencil mark there. So the stencil, you find those hand stencils all over Eastern Australia. This is interesting because if you look at that little finger, you could say maybe that joint has been, you know, top joint of the little finger might have been removed. And this was something done in many Aboriginal groups in Eastern Australia or all over Australia to either sometimes for mourning, you know, if you're mourning someone, sometimes as a kind of initiation ritual. But is this an example? Is that just a short little finger, or is that actually showing a finger that's been amputated? Well, you don't know. And then there's this one that I find very interesting. It looks like maybe a club of some kind. You can see it's there. It's got something there. But it's life size, you know, because it's a stencil, so that's how big it is. And you wouldn't have a club that little. So again, you don't know what it is, but it certainly is interesting, whatever it is. Yeah. And at another site, not too far away, at Mount Moffat, also in Queensland, just a short distance away. This would be the next one marked on your map. At Mount Moffat, which is part of Carnarvon National Park, that's north of Mitchell, Queensland. You find other stencils. You can see the stencils there. There's a stenciled hand with the arm. The whole arm is the lower arm. And then there's this very interesting stencil here. It's quite rare in Australia, but it seems to be the stencil of an actual person. You know, maybe it's a child, but you can see there the legs, and there's an arm. You can kind of see the arm there. That arm may not be with it, but that's quite unusual, you know, to have an actual person standing there being stenciled. So That's an interesting site. Another one. Yeah. This is another Laura site, another one from Laura. Because when you look at this art, of course, you think, well, how old is it? What's the age of it? And there are many, many very well thought out and very good anthropological, archaeological books put out with all kinds of ingenious ways of dating, because the Aboriginal art is done in mineral and ochre, or it's pecked in the stone. There isn't really any way you can date that. It can't be radiocarbon dated, because you can only radiocarbon date things with of a biological nature. There are places where beeswax has been used as part of the art, and then you can date the beeswax, you can radiocarbon date it, and you do get a date for that, which you can apply to the painting. But in most cases, you just can't know. I'll give you an example. At Yankee Hat, the one I mentioned in Namadgi National Park, archaeological excavations have been done there by Josephine Flood, for one, and by other archaeologists. Someone named Kelvin Officer also did a lot of work there. And they excavated down to sterile earth, to earth that has no remains in it, no human remains. So you find that the oldest layer, with flakes of flint, with campfire charcoal, with bones, that have been used for food, things that are definitely human settlement. And you can date that on the charcoal. You can date the charcoal with radiocarbon dating. But that doesn't tell you how old the rock paintings are. So, you have that big boulder with the rock art on it, and just below it, you have the excavation was conducted, and that date of 500 to 600 years ago was taken out from radiocarbon dating. But you can't say that the paintings date from that time. Maybe they do, but also maybe they don't. There's no way to connect that kind of dating with the rock art, even if they're associated close together, because you have to have something that you can date that rock art directly. Another thing about Aboriginal art is that it was often you might say renewed, or it was done for maybe ceremonial reasons, and then it would be done again. It would be restored. So again, the art that's actually there now isn't, even if you say that there has been art there for 500 years, if you guess there might have been, you can't say that the art that's there now is that art, because of the inevitable changes that would have gone on. And that's one thing to think about when you're thinking about Aboriginal rock art and rock engravings, is that they are very fragile. And I've seen myself that some sites have become fainter in time. So they are very much in need of careful care. Of course, no one should ever walk on them or in any way try to trace them or copy them or anything like that. There were some really sad cases at Bondi, up above Bondi Beach at the golf course, that's there at the north end. There are some Aboriginal engravings there too. And you can go on the golf course if you don't mind the chance of getting hit by a golf ball. You can go there and you can see those engravings. But unfortunately, in the 60s, it was thought a really good idea by the council to take modern tools and dig the outlines deeper. So they affect, you might say, in preserving the engraving, they've kind of destroyed it, because what you see there now isn't the original engraving. It might be the original outline, but what you see is what was made by modern tools. Okay, well, another way to date these paintings and paintings especially, not so much the engravings, is by stylistically through superimposition. So here you find there's this is again from Laura, there's a Quincun figure, and over it is a turtle. That really is a turtle there. So you can say from that, the turtle is definitely newer or younger than the Quincun figure because the turtle is over the Quincun figure. And there have been a great many books have been written on trying to stylistically say, this older art is a different style and therefore is quite a bit older than the one on top of it. And then we can say that the art that's like that somewhere else that doesn't have a superimposed thing, that's also of that date, but it's only dated in relation to the others. So it's not dated, it's relative dating, you might say. Not any date that you can say, oh, this was 3,000 years ago or something, but only that this is older than that, and that style may be older than that style, but you can't say more than that. There are some really interesting things that have gone on about cases of patina, where there's mineral deposits formed over rock art, and you can say then that if you can date that mineral deposit by geological comparisons, then you could say, yeah, that's certainly, you can say it's very, very old, definitely. Yeah. Okay, now, when I came here, I came 2 years ago and gave a talk here at the Jung Society, and I tried to establish, I hope I did, establish that Aboriginal rock art, both paintings and engravings, that it actually has meaning as archetype, or not all of them, but some of them do. Now, Carl Jung, and I talked about this last time, I'll just give a brief summary of it. In his definitions of an archetype, Carl Jung had some very insightful things to say. So he said, for example, that an archetype is universal and belongs, in his words, to the whole human race. Another quote from him, he defined an archetype as an intimate, in his own words, element of our psychic structure. And thirdly, he said that an archetype, I quote again, persists throughout the ages and requires interpreting ever anew. So to me, anyway, Jung kind of established that there is an archetypal connection with Aboriginal art. Well, of course, Jung wasn't talking about Aboriginal art at all, but about all archetypes for all humans. Now, he didn't leave the archetypes alone and unconnected. He made it clear that archetypes are an integral part of that vast sea of interconnected human experience that he called the collective unconscious. As he put it in his 1936 article on the concept of the collective unconscious, it's a quote, "The concept of the archetype, which is an indispensable correlate of the idea of the collective unconscious, indicates the existence of definite forms in the psyche, which seem to be present always and everywhere." So with that in mind, it seems to me that you can have archetypes. Again, I say not everything is an archetype, of course, but some things are, and some of those things are Aboriginal rock art. You can say that there are two kinds of archetype. There's a sort of an archetypical archetype that is on the surface of the unconscious, and there's one that's deeper. And of course, depending on the person, what one person finds deep, another person will find shallow. But I'd like to give an example of what I'm trying to get at by an advertisement. And this is the 1906 advertisement by Leonetto Capol. Leonetto, get his name right. Leonetto Capiello. And it was done for a French company to get people to drink meringue quina. But, it's clearly more than that. And it's become a work of fine art, and it's in the National Gallery right here in Canberra. So you can go look at it. Well, when I look at that one, I see, okay, there is, that's not the devil, but it's a little devil, the kind of devil, it's mischievous devil. And this devil is an archetype of a seducer. He's got the beard and horns of a goat, a lusty goat. He's got this kind of mincing step of someone trying to entice you. He's got the bottle of strong drink, which of course an enticer should have. And to top it off, he's got a green color, and the green color has a feeling of kind of befuddling feeling on the one hand of unhealthiness, of sickness, and on the other of fecund fertility. So when I look at that, though, to me, yes, it's an archetype, but doesn't go much further than that. I don't see much beyond that. It's just a little green devil, and it has that archetype of the seducer. Next one. But in Sydney, in Marrickville, in Sydney, there is a street mural. A street artist has done this, of these two women. Now, one of them looks a bit older than the other one. One of them is clearly human, and the other one is a kind of a female fawn. I know there aren't supposed to be any female fawns, but in this case, there's a female fawn because she's got the furry lower part of her body of a fawn. And they're holding each other in this funny way. They've each got a hand grasping the arm of the other one like that. And they've both got eyes that are big eyes that are focused on something either far away or deep within. So that's an archetype for me. I find that a very, very profound archetype. It's an archetype that you can't say, oh, this is an archetype of that. It's not a little devil, but it's something that leads you into a deeper contemplation of yourself. Yeah. Now, there are just in closing, there are 3 Aboriginal rock art sites that I think share this kind of deep archetype. One of them is this place called Bayame's Cave, or Bayame Cave. It's due south of Singleton in the Hunter Valley. It's on private land, but it is registered as a historical Aboriginal site. And you'll see what's in there in a minute. So the next one. In this cave is this very, very impressive male figure. Very impressive male figure with these arms that go out like that. The legs have kind of worn away, but in the right light, you can see the legs go down like that. Around are these stencils of boomerangs. There's stencils of axes. And there are straight line stencils and stencils of the hand with the lower arm attached. So this is clearly somebody that, or an entity, it's not a human, but it's a spirit entity of some sort, that is very, very, very important to the people who did it. Now, the earliest scientific recording of this site was in an article of 1893 by a man named I've forgotten his name shortly. To get his name for you. It's south of Singleton. It's in the Hunter Valley. Matthews. It's near a place called Millbrookdale, and it's on private land, but it is open. You can go there. You can go up and see it. So Matthews in 1893, he identified this figure as Bayame. Now, Bayame is a very important creator spirit, which is found all over all over southeastern Australia. And Bayame is a figure that came down from the sky. He landed on a mountain called Mount Yango, which is flat on top because he flattened it. And then he came and he gave the sacred law to the people, and he made natural features like rivers and so on. So Bayame is a very important figure Is this Bayame? Well, Matthews only said, maybe it's Miami. You know, he doesn't say for sure. So who did he find out from? He doesn't tell us. Who told him it was Miami? You know, so all you can really say is that that's a very, very remarkable figure. It might be Miami, but it might not. And I find it as an archetype really a powerful image. Next one. Okay, another one is at the Bulgandra Aboriginal Heritage Site. It's in Brisbane Water National Park, and it's off the road between Gosford and Woy Woy. And it's marked, but kind of discreetly marked, this little sign. It's nicely set up. There's a pathway, and when you get to it, we've got a boardwalk that goes around this one and several other engravings. Now, there's a very good book on Aboriginal rock art of the Sydney area by Sudbury and Clegg. It's called Aboriginal Rock Art. I have to get the exact. I can get the exact name for you, but we won't worry about that right now. Anyway, it's a very good book, and the authors of that book didn't know that this actually has an Aboriginal explanation. So there is a person who is Gavi Duncan. He's the Aboriginal Cultural Education and Tourism Officer of the Jung Local Aboriginal Land Council. And he's got a video on YouTube, and you can access this video, you know, by putting in, I suppose, the Aboriginal Cultural Officer or else the Bulgandri site. That's how I found it. And you find this wonderful video in which Duncan describes what this is according to him. According to him, this is a figure of Bayame. Now, that's not recorded anywhere scientifically. But of course, tradition is tradition. So this is not something that is part of written literature, but it's an oral tradition, which he mentions. He says that this is Bayame, and he's holding in one hand the moon, crescent moon, and in the other hand, the morning star. Okay, so, and he goes into other things too. I won't, like the belt and so on, but I won't have time to talk about that. Now, Clegg and Stanbury, in their book, they say that it's a figure. They don't say it's Bayame. They say it's a figure of a man in ceremonial garb, and that he's holding in one hand a sword club, what they call a sword club, and on the other hand, an oval object of unknown use. So they say they don't know what that was. So you've got two possibilities there. You've got the traditional one, and you've got one by rock art specialists. And interestingly enough, at the actual site, the national park sign gives you yet another interpretation. And that one says that this is a figure holding a shield in his right hand, that's the shield, and a boomerang there in his left. So you've got these different interpretations. Well, what do you say about that? You know, really, you can't actually say any of them is necessarily relevant to you, the observer, but there is definitely, to me anyway, there's an archetype there, and I find it again a very an archetype that really talks to me, that speaks to me, and I think that it is something that you'd have to say it has that archetypal impact. And so you can look at Aboriginal rock art. You're not in any way trying to say that you're giving a meaning of it. No, you're just saying if it has that impact on you, it has an impact, and that impact is open to all human beings if it is an archetype. Now, the last one is another one this is at Barawa, I can't pronounce that word, Barawa Water which is a northern, very far northern suburb of Sydney. It is a very interesting place. It's by the car park. There's a ferry down at that place. And if you go to the right on a little road that goes up, you come to a car park. And if you walk a bit beyond that car park, you'll find on your right, there's a big boulder, and it's got this Aboriginal carving on it. Now, if you look at that, you can't make anything out of it. At least I couldn't make anything out of it. But then when you outline, not of course the actual thing, but when you take a photograph and outline on your photograph in white ink, then you do get something that is, well, it's a coherent picture, but you can't say what. You can say, this is a male figure, spirit or human or what, you don't know. It's got the characteristic straight lines which are supposed to show either that's hair or it's a headdress or it's rays, but it often appears on Aboriginal rock art around the Sydney area. So you can say, well, that's a figure, all right, a human figure, or a male figure. But what are these over here? There's some kind of creature. It's got arms of another creature around it. Stanbury and Clegg, they just don't know what it is, and they say that. And when they say that, they have a very interesting quote, which I'd like to give to you. They say that, like much good art, Aboriginal rock engravings, leave many matters for the viewer to decide. Much of their pleasure today is in personal interpretation. So I'm really in agreement with that. And those are two rock art specialists. They're right. And I find this engraving in particular to be an open-ended invitation to the depths of my being. Well, in closing, I'd like to encourage everybody here, if you haven't already seen any Aboriginal rock art, really you should. It's a wonderful part of our heritage, and as I say, some of them, of course, are quite hard to get to, but others are very much right there. Like in Sydney itself, there are lots of rock art sites just in suburbs that you can see. And as I mentioned in Canberra, there's some other Aboriginal things. So I hope everyone will go out and look at an Aboriginal rock engraving or painting. Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll have a break for about 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And
Okay, thank you.
Richard.
Thanks. Yeah, anyone? Yeah.
Just wondering, rock art goes back 50, 60,000 years.
Yeah, that's right. There's.
Tell me, at that time around 60,000 years, there was a particular prehistoric bird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any rock art? In my research, not that I've studied rock art.
Yeah.
Is there any rock art of those birds?
Well, a sort of an example of that. I know there was a case there's a book put out by the ANU Press on, it deals with dating and motifs and things like that in the Northern Territory. And it mentions there is a prehistoric bird, of course I don't remember the name of it, but it was a bird which was extinct, thousands of years ago, but still could have been around when the first people were in Australia. And for a time, they thought that this painting could have been of that bird. But then eventually the feeling, scientific feeling moved against that. I can't remember exactly what the reasoning was, but they decided, no, it wasn't that bird. Now, of course, you can say, maybe it really was the bird, Another example is in northern Victoria, near Beechworth. there are some very good Aboriginal um, engravings. They're quite hard to see, and one of them is said to be a Tasmanian tiger. Now, again, you can say, well, yes, there's an outline and it's got lines on its back parts. Maybe it is, but there's honestly no way you can be sure. But it's possible. Yeah.
Richard, and each rock art that you showed tonight, I wonder, is there any technology? Thanks. Is there any technology where they can say if certain eras of the Aboriginal culture have been overlaid onto the original type of artwork? Like, are there, like ages of
Oh, yeah.
development?
Well, that is what most of the books on rock art sort of try to do. They try to, it's like if you have art like Italian art of an area that's got a known history. Of course, you can say, this painting is stylistically in that era. It's easy to do, but in the case of Aboriginal art, there isn't any history to go with it, except in some cases there's traditional history, but that's very difficult.
Would any of the elders know?
Well, this is the trouble, that there are, whenever you visit rock art sites in Eastern Australia, there will usually be a sign by an elder of the group in that area. And it will say something like, be respectful of these paintings or engravings. They're part of the heritage of our people. They're very sacred to us, but we don't know what they mean. So they will say they don't. And part of it is that I mentioned the man, Mick McLean. He was very highly advanced in his own culture. And there were a lot of things that there was another Aboriginal man there who had never been initiated of the same group. And he couldn't tell that man a lot of what he knew because, you had to be a certain degree of initiation. So the problem always is that even if an elder is willing and does know and willing to talk to an outsider, you doubt if they're going to give much more than the sort of information that they would give, say, to women and children in their own group. So, it's kind of like asking, my father was a Mason, sort of like asking Masons to tell you about, something about, he was in the Scottish Rite, whatever that is. But, they would never tell you.
No, that's right. It was secret.
Yeah.
But the song lines, like the music part of the Aboriginal culture. I studied Aboriginal music in my undergrad degree, and what I discovered was that at the same time I was studying that, I was studying the early English motets and the structure of them. And what I found, I really should have done some more research on this, but I went in a different direction. What I found was that the structure of the early English motets were identical to the children's corroboree song that I was analysing and working through. And I thought, how can that be? This is an early English motet and an Aboriginal. We were only allowed to, analyse children's corroboree songs, of course. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, only that I guess that's a good argument if you're a Jungian for the subconscious, for the unconscious.
Archetypal.
Yeah, there's that collective unconscious. And
the collective unconscious.
Yeah, it's like if you look at, say, Indian art or Indian music, you can appreciate that even if you don't know anything about Indian culture. It's because some of it can talk to you in unconsciousness.
That is sort of archetypal, isn't it? Because
it is.
It's like the English couldn't possibly have had anything to do with the Aborigines at that time.
No.
From the 12th century to
Australia. But it's a good example of how that can happen.
Yeah. And I should imagine that the art itself would be like that too.
Yes, I think so. And as I mentioned, my friend Louise Hercus, who died in 2018, she also was an early researcher in song lines. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
it's just
so she was
fascinating.
an amazing person. Mm.
Thank you, Richard. It's
Thank you.
fascinating.
Yes.
You have to put your hand up. You have to get into the middle of the
Relatively
picture.
old.
Keep only showing 3/4.
We have no evidence, do we, that any of the art sites, even those that by the luck of the dryness of the cave or something
Yep.
like that, no evidence that any of them are remotely as old as the evidence we have of human habitation.
Yeah, I think the only thing is that you do have those cases where there's been a patina of mineral over the art, and then you can say that must be pretty old.
Yes.
But you still can't date it.
No.
No, and of course, you never know if the earliest 60,000 years ago, if those people well, actually in Tasmania, there was an archaeologist at the ANU named Rhys Jones, and he did some excavations in a cave in Tasmania in the southwest, and he found there they were just lines that had been drawn with fingers in the soft material of the cave roof. And I've forgotten how, but he felt that that was back of that kind of date, tens of thousands of years old. I've forgotten how he came to that conclusion.
So some of the simple things that were incised, because we have to remember that materials like ochre and pipe clay, in fact, can very easily degrade. Even the legs of Biami in that nice dry cave in the Hunter Valley, they're disappearing over time. We know that when Matthews wrote about them, they were much more distinctly there. May I just ask a second question, though? It suddenly occurred to me tonight that I've become, after seeing some of those Laura paintings, I've become a little blasé. So the first time I saw a hand stencil in Carnarvon Park, I was blown away by the hand stencil. Now I say, more hand stencils. Do you have any hypothesis about what the many hand stencils are in aid of? Are they just like people in our country and all over the world write, Bob was here? Is it, look, here's my hand, or look, I'm a man and my finger's been cut off because I've been initiated, or I'm in mourning, or any notion?
Well, about the finger amputation, it evidently often was women who actually had their finger taken off, But there was a site called the Tombs at Mount Moffat section of Carnarvon National Park. And at Mount Moffat, there's a cliff, and the cliff face has lots of holes, biggish holes in it. And this is now historically verified. And in the early years of European contact, Aboriginal people were putting their dead in those holes. They wrapped them in bark and they put various kinds of things with them and put them in those holes. They've been doing that for as long as anyone knew. And at those places, there always were handprints. So you could say, well, maybe the handprint is some kind of mourning sign, but that's speculation, of course. And unfortunately, the European settlers in that area quickly looted they just took all those Aboriginal burials out and dumped the bones and kept any bit of art or bark or whatever they were getting and kept that as a curiosity. So, but at least it kept the memory that maybe the handprint does have something to do with mourning. That's the only thing I've ever heard. Of course, handprints are very common all over the world. It's quite common to have handprints. I know in North America, the handprints are there. Oh, well, I can just think of the ones in Arizona or New Mexico. There are rock paintings, and they often involve a hand stencil. Now, of course, again, yeah, I mean, again, you have historical groups, and some of those groups do have a connection with the past. Like my linguistics teacher at the University of Arizona was a Tewa Indian, but I don't know if anyone has ever told. I just haven't read it. Maybe someone has, but in Australia, I don't think anyone has ever. And there's a speculation about it. Yeah.
Ian, our friend Richard, our friend Ian, is an entomologist who spent his whole life studying parasitic wasps. He has a passion for parasitic wasps. And he's done all through Australia and so forth. He loves, for example, country churchyards, because very often they have a fence and a graveyard, which has been kept out of stock and native animals for 200 years since grazing animals have been there. And he finds microcolonies of insects that are sort of often quite unique. And the same in caves. And he's found that quite a lot of Aboriginal art has been and is being ruined by moths building mud nests on top of it. And of course you can carefully remove them, but as you say, you lose the pigments and so forth at the same time. So that's another factor that can restrict their life. Have you seen much evidence of that sort of thing?
Yeah, we saw those interesting structures that wasps build, And I don't know, the swallow, some kinds of swallows, are they reusing wasps' nests, or do they also make a kind of a... And yeah, we've seen those at some of those rock sites.
Just on that point, is there any development going on in some kind of way of an aerosol spray or something to preserve these at all? Is there any technology at all?
There's a great fear of doing anything.
Yeah.
Because you don't know. I mean, will it, like importing the cane toad, is it going to be something that will prove detrimental? So I don't know of anything like that that's been done. I do know, as I mentioned, that in the past, the council at Bondi Golf Course did, what do they call it? They use the word, maybe it was re-engraved. They re-engraved those paintings and then those engravings. And then, of course, it's always cited now as an example of innocent but terrible efforts to do something good.
Do you know that at all overseas with,
I don't know.
they've done things like that, Aztec art or...
I just don't know.
No. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Engravings at Bondi, Richard, makes me remember you said you were going to explain something about the method of the engraving.
Oh, yeah, that's
but
right.
I don't think you did.
I didn't. No, I didn't. What they did is they would take a sharp stone and punch holes in the outline. So if you're going to do a person, you'd punch holes in the outline like that. And then you take the same sort of stone and you knock away the area between the holes, and that makes a groove. And that's, of course, very time consuming. Yeah, and it's probably why a lot of those those engravings look kind of crude, because it's not the very best way. Yeah, to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Photo collection, and
thank you.
I'm wondering if anyone else has, like, I'm sure you've researched this in old journal articles where people have gone to certain sites and would have documented it, but with the collection you've got, surely you've got a unique
Well-
collection of these images that really you
yeah,
could
well, thank
publish,
you.
couldn't you? Like, does
maybe.
anyone else have this collection? Like,
No, I think they do. I think, well, I don't know, but there are a lot of professional anthropologists and archaeologists. I suppose they do.
going around collecting images?
I suppose they do. I don't actually know any.
Yeah. Well,
I did know Rhys Jones. I knew him.
okay.
But that's wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, well, I mean, have you? I guess it'd be pretty easy to Google whether there are coffee table books or picture books that have collections of Aboriginal art.
Yeah, there must be. There
That-
must be.
That's a basic question,
Yeah.
but you just seem to have. I mean, they're beautifully cropped.
Oh, thank you.
It's just an amazing
Well,
collection.
of course, I'd love to do that.
Yeah. So congratulations.
If you know a publisher.
Yeah.
I'm sorry? Oh, yes, okay. This one?
Oh, sorry.
Oh. Okay, now your question might be taken because they're walking to the monitor.
John?
Hi, John, what was the question?
Yeah, two questions, Richard.
Yeah.
One is, do you know any Aboriginal people who have become interested in the Jung theories and the Jung philosophy and know about the archetypes?
Yeah. No, I don't know of anybody at all. And I mean, the last Aboriginal person that I knew in any depth was Mick McLean. He died in 1978.
Oh.
And since then, I haven't met anyone. No, and he didn't. Of course, I didn't know about Jung either in 1978.
Yeah. And the second question is, what's a good introductory book into this aspect of Aboriginal art?
Well, the one that I really recommend is, and I'll get the exact title of it.
And so we're right. That's
There it is. Is the one by let's see. I'm going to get the exact name of it. Okay. It was. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was. It's by P. Stanbury. That's Stanbury, and J. Clegg, Clegg. So Stanbury and J. Clegg, Clegg. And it's called A Field Guide to Aboriginal Rock Engravings. And it was published by the University of Sydney Press together with Oxford University in 1990. And I know that book is available in the Institute of Aboriginal, Torres Strait and Aboriginal Studies. It also, I think there's still a copy in the ANU library. And of course, anyone can use that library as long as they don't take the books out. But during those torrential rains we had a few years ago, one of those copies was destroyed. So that's a sad thing.
Oh, yeah.
And there may be one in the University of Sydney library. I'm sure it's not maybe it's available online somewhere, but that's a very, very, very good place to start with. And it does give the location of the rock art.
Well, I've got Stanbury, and what was the second name?
And Clegg,
Clegg.
Clegg.
Clegg. Oh, yeah.
Clegg. And another really good one is Josephine Flood, Flood, and it's called The Treasures of Ancient Australia. And that's a really good book for, it was published by the by University of Queensland in about 1990, I think. And it goes into all over Australia, and it gives the sites and how to get to them and about them. Those are two very good books to start with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How difficult was it to get into the
Substitutors.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Laura is very easy. You can drive.
We only had very limited access.
Yeah. What you do is the road is paved to Laura, so you can drive there go from Mariba and up the highway to Laura. So it's not difficult physically to get there. And once you're there, as I say, there's a little museum, and it's run by the Angara Aboriginal Land Council. And at least when we were there was someone always in the museum, and you could very easy to take the walking tour that had, guided signs telling you what the rock art was. And then if you wanted to have an in-depth tour of more interesting sites, then you could get a member of the council who would go out and take you to those sites. And of course they charge something, but not very much. It was a really easy site to get to and to do. Some of the others, like the Mount Moffat one, you really have to have a high wheelbase vehicle because the roads are very rough. But others around Sydney, they're just there. Yeah.
The rock, is that very far from?
Very easy to get to. No, it's a suburb. I mean, they're very forested areas, but you go on the highway. I think it's probably the old Pacific Highway. Yeah. Oh, you could say.
Highway, you turn off at Barara and you go to Barara Borders Road and you just follow it all the way down into the gully, and then before you get to the ferry you turn off to the right, you go into the car park, and then you just follow the car park along. You said it's right at the end.
It is. It's at the end, and it's really.
I used to live around there.
Yeah.
So, and I'm amazed I never saw that rock. I know of a different Aboriginal art site, but not that one. So it's the Pacific Highway.
Yeah. And the one it's also in a small park, isn't it?
It's in a small park.
Yeah.
You need to Google it.
Yep.
But it's at Barara Heights.
Yep.
And that's the suburb above Barara Waters. You actually go through Barara.
Oh yeah, I know the ferry, and because my brother-in-law used to live on the river, and we had to take the ferry from there, so it would be right in that area.
Yeah. It's worth seeing that rock. It's very
fantastic.
Amazing. Yeah.
And to puzzle what the meaning.
Yes, that's right. It's really interesting. Yeah. Anyone else have anything? Well. Oh yeah. Okay.
Like a thought occurred to me, and probably other people have thought this, but I just reminded when I go to Hanging Rock in Tidbinbilla, like I have a relationship with the rock.
Yeah.
And what I do is straight away is put my hand on it.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And that connects me to the rock as a person, as a spirit.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, maybe that's partly what the hand is about. I'm connected to this place, or I'm connected to this rock.
Yeah.
And even when I leave, my hand is still there.
Still there.
So
yeah.
I
think that's
just
probably
a
right.
thought.
It's a kind of immortality, isn't it?
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. Oh yes.
Just a little comment. As an ISTJ, I tend to look for meaning in everything. And I'm quite disturbed by Picasso's later life. I'd rather when he was starting off.
Yep.
And a lot of it, I can't imagine why people would pay money for it,
Yes.
But Picasso in his elderly days was aware of that perception among ignoramuses and plebs like himself. And one of his responses I rather liked, which he said, in looking at art, It's often hard to find a meaning in it. But don't be dismayed by that. When we listen to birds, we often can't find any meaning in that, but we like listening to them anyway, don't we?
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And I thought that was rather a nice response.
Yeah.
People who say, I
Yeah.
don't know what this rubbish means, you know, when you go down
Yeah.
the gallery,
Yeah,
wonder why they pay money for it.
yeah, that's right. That's a very good point.
Well, you don't have to understand the meaning
No,
of the bird song, do you?
no. And of course, it's interesting, someone like Picasso was perfectly capable of making fine representational art, but I guess he was seeing something deeper. Yeah. Yeah.
It can't be answered because the rock art isn't as old as, it doesn't go back as far as Aboriginals being in the country, but I wonder how, you know, the art developed over kind of thousands of years. Like if it was like in Tasmania, it does seem to be very primitive. So, you know, it would have gone through golden ages of becoming more complex and, you know, it would have evolved in different areas with different communities and, you know, the styles, and a lot of it could be lost. And so I guess, you know, 60,000 years ago, there may not have been very much or rock art, or, you know,
because that's a long time.
You kind of wonder, did the people who first got here 60 odd thousand years ago, were they creating art, you know? And I mean, I know we can't answer this, but you kind of, you know, they're like, as Barbara's saying, all we've got is, you know, well, not all we've got, but the work we've got is not the oldest work. It's, you know, it's kind of the work that's lasted.
Yeah, that's right. There is art that, as I say, has a mineral overlay. And it takes a long time to create that.
What's the oldest work like that?
I don't know offhand. It's I haven't been as interested in the age, because to me it's more the art, you know. But I know that we all have a desire to see something older and older. But in a way, you know, it's the art that matters, not the age. This is good.
I mean, the age, though, maybe, like you say, maybe it's not relevant, but you kind of just think you would have had these communities that changed over these such long periods of time, and you would have had the rise of styles and the fall of styles.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the Lara art is a kind of a culmination. You know, that's a case where you've got some genius there. that art is really special. In terms of being art, you know. Whereas it's, I mean, the Bulgandry and some of those engravings are very interesting, and they bring out something, but, you know, they don't take your breath away as art. But the Lara ones do.
But and once again, this is all speculation, but some art might have been, you know, created by anyone in the community, whereas, you know, some art might be created by someone who really was.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most interesting things about creativity, I had a friend whose name was Ron Maduro, and he was doing research in India on, and I was too, but we were in different areas. He was doing research on creativity in a community of traditional painters who make religious posters, and all of these religious posters, kind of like, you know, Renaissance Christian art, they all have to have the same motifs. You know, Krishna has always got to be blue. Krishna, if he's Srinath, has always got to be in a certain pose. And they look the same to an outsider, but to people in that community, in the artist community, they knew which members were creative and which ones were just sort of hacks, you know. And it's interesting that creativity can be something that can only be perceived sometimes by another creative person in that community.
I guess we've seen that a bit in Bali, where you have, you know, you go to the painter's village and, you know, there's this traditional kind of work, but some people are doing a much better,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
like everyone's trained in the same
Yep.
kind of style, but
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's interesting.
that's exactly what you just said.
Yeah, no, but it's a very interesting book, but it's very hard to get. It was published by the University of California, and I think there's a copy in the ANU library. But it's anyone interested in creativity would find it a very interesting book.
Well, you would think that these pieces that you're saying are more archetypal or seem like deeper, more
Yeah.
powerful pieces are done in a more ritualistic way by a higher, a more qualified sort of artist.
Yeah, somebody anyway who's in tune with his or her unconscious, and who can bring those images out and put them on stone. Yeah.
And that would be, someone doing that would be playing a different role.
Yeah, that's right. Before we quit, I might say there's a very interesting bit of Aboriginal, or, well, it's debated, at Devonport in Tasmania. You know, when you come in on the ferry there's a bluff, and on the right, and on that bluff, there is a little park, and there was an Aboriginal group that had developed it for school children, but it's sort of, when I was there, it was all locked up, and I guess, you know, it depends on volunteers, and if the volunteers lose interest or go away, it's no longer there. But you can still follow it, and these are very interesting bits of art. They are circular, some of them. Some of them seem to have shapes, and they're very, very, very deeply engraved. And for a while, there were articles written in the 30s saying, these are very incredible Aboriginal art, you know. And then it was decided in the scientific community that they were natural. When you look at them and you think, it doesn't look natural, but, you know. But you also think it's very hard to think it's Aboriginal because they're so deeply engraved, and they just didn't have those kinds of tools. So, and the Aboriginal community there did accept it as being something that was a traditional thing. And so finally it came out to be that these were, and I've forgotten the word that's used, but they're natural features that become sacred. And there's an example of that in northern New South Wales, where there's a woman, it's not far from Armidale, there's a woman lying in a creek bed. And because you remember that, yeah. And it's natural, but it looks like a woman lying in a creek bed. And that was also considered sacred by the Aboriginal group. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I wonder if sometime we might explore the concept of Gaia, of the Earth as a living organism.
Yeah.
That's it's very ancient, of course, but and there's been a lot more thought and serious scientific introspection about it.
Yeah.
Who was the scientist who died a little while ago? Lovelace, was it?
Lovelace, yeah.
Yeah, who developed a lot more.
Yep. And suffered a lot of criticism from the scientific community.
Indeed, yeah. Well, all the better, you know.
Yes, that's right.
And I think perhaps we could make something of that and link it back to a lot of this ancient sort of
I think that'd
thought.
be really good. And I hope you might give a talk next year.
Well, I wasn't suggesting that.
But
I wouldn't go
hope
that
you will.
far.
I hope you will. Yeah, because it's so easy, you know, when you think of things like pandemics, that they clearly happen partly because people live more tightly packed, and they move around a lot more than they used to. So, and then it's easy to think, well, that's a kind of natural reaction, you know, and it's quite logical, really. You don't have to say it's a goddess who's angry. It's just something that happens. And I think maybe that's what he had in mind, do you think, with Gaia?
Well, that's what we could explore.
Yep, that'd be very good. Yeah. Good.